Well, we'll start. So we're going to talk about capture the flag. Again, it's Robert Boedigheimer. A little bit about me. So I'm a Microsoft MVP for developer technology, specifically web things for a long time. I just picked up security actually last year. I've been doing a lot of cryptography and these sorts of talks. So I picked that up in security as well. Progress champion with Fiddler, which is similar to the MVP program. Pluralsight author. I've got some links at the end to some courses from this that might apply. And I've got Twitter, email, and blog there if you need to reach out to me. So when we start, the first thing I want to warn people is you need to be safe when you're doing some of these things and using some sites. I always get concerned when I'm like looking up SQL injection and things that I might be on a hacker site that has who knows what kind of malware. If you didn't know this, Windows 10 and above has what's called a sandbox. So you can actually go turn this on as a feature. And what it will do is it'll open up basically a mini virtual machine. Do whatever you want in there. So I just browse in there, then I hit X, goes away, and everything that was in there is now gone. So that should greatly reduce the risks you have. I would say most of the time when I surf the internet in general, I'm just doing it from the sandbox. Unless I really know and trust the site. So the few sites I'm going to go to today, I have faith in general, though, as you're looking, especially like I said, when you're looking through this kind of hacker materials and stuff, you might want to be careful with that. The other thing I do that's helpful as well, Windows has what's called native boot. So I like having a virtual machine. So I've been doing that for a long time. And it's great, except it was using some of the hardware resources. So when I had the host up and ran a virtual machine, it's not using everything that my machine could actually handle because it's split between the host and the virtual machine. You can set up a virtual machine in this native boot mode. So it will still be, it's a single file VHD file. So it's great because I can do backups if I do go somewhere and I think that might have done something bad. I can basically just drag back the VHD file and start over. And they call it native boot because as it boots, you're using all of the hardware. So it's just great because you don't give up any performance. And like I said, it's safe and it makes backups really easy. So use one of these two techniques, or if you're on whatever you're using, just be aware some of these places that you might just generally search and find, you might want to be a little careful with. So what is capture the flag? It's not the outdoor game. If any of you did that when you were kids, I used to, that was fun. You had two teams set up flags basically in your bases. You had to run and grab their flag without getting tagged and bring it back to your base. But that's not what we're going to talk about here. The idea with capture the flag here, it's a computer security competition. You're going to utilize a variety of different security techniques to find flags, and I'll show you what those look like. The flags typically follow a pattern. So whichever contest you're in or competition, they'll say, this is what a flag will look like. I'm going to show you some examples today from competitions that aren't consistent with that. And the only problem is that sometimes you may or may not know something is a flag because it doesn't match a specific pattern. So again, I'll show you that. The name of the challenge is often a hint. So if you're kind of confused about what it might be, think about what the title might make you think of, and I'll show you some of those here as well, but just remember the name might be a good hint. I always document how I solved or as I'm attempting because I want to be able to see my progress. I'll go from one challenge to another within a competition, and I don't want to have to start all over again. I want to know I tried this, I didn't, and it's really helpful because at the end then I have stuff that I can do a write-up. So one of the main competitions I'm in, he documents all of the solutions that he did, and then I follow up with mine where we just did something different, like we just approached it different ways. I like the capture the flag. I started probably in about 2020, so I had more free time. I've been an e-commerce developer for about 25 years, and so I had to know the OWASP, PCI, all those things for security, and I decided to try it. I was a little concerned, the imposter syndrome as normal, but as a speaker for a conference where I was doing the competition, especially talking about security things, I didn't want to join and then like be in last place, but I decided I had free time, I wanted to try it. A lot of the things I've heard about before, at least for me, I had heard about SQL injection. I roughly knew what it was going to be. It's totally different for me to be actually doing it myself. Like when I have to try 25 times to get the syntax to be exactly right based on the database, that's when it finally clicked with me, and it just set in better. So I'm not attacking machines, I'm defending them, but I also like to be able to see how do people attack things. And so getting that perspective as I was going through was really helpful. There's two basic types of capture the flag. I've only done the one called Jeopardy, and basically it's just a list of challenges. So the one I'm in usually every year probably has 20-ish or so specific challenges, and you get points for doing it each challenge. So if you get stuck on one, it's not like building on the other, but they come in from these basic 6 areas. You'll see a lot of cryptography or encoding. We'll see some steganography, which is basically hiding data inside something else that you wouldn't know it's hidden. Web exploitation is just taking advantage of things like SQL injections, flaws in websites. Forensics, if you have to go look at something as occurred and check logs and try to figure out what happened. Reverse engineering, which I'll show you in one of the examples today. You're just basically like in .NET, C#'s compiled down to intermediate language. You can actually decompile or spin it back so that you can see what the source code would have looked like for that. So I'm going to show you one of those. And there's binary exploitation, where you're just taking advantage of other flaws in a system. The other type is attack defend. And in this case, you basically get 2 teams that are competing against each other, and you're trying to take over their server while you're also defending your own. So people usually split up on the team and say, I'm going to be defending, you go attack. I have not done that yet. Like I said, I've just done Jeopardy ones, but those kind of competitions are out there if that sounds interesting. And by the way, I didn't say it, but I'm not, I said a developer. I'm not formally in security. I've been very interested in it for a long time. And where I was doing it with the e-commerce site, you see a lot of these various things as we go through. So you're going to see this GSCC. That's the main place that I've been doing the competition. It's the Granite State Code Camp that they have every fall. So I'm going to just start showing you examples of specific challenges and then how they were solved. The thing that's difficult, I can't show a lot of the things that were live from 2020 because he's revving that each time to have a new system set up. So I've got some write-ups we're going to go through. I'll show some physical examples where I still can. So we'll start with this one. This is not uncommon. It just says welcome challenge and then a bunch of gibberish. So this is usually a type of encoding. So we're going to have to try to figure out what is that. And if you're familiar with encoding, we'll show some of the various techniques here, but it sure looked like encoding to me. So I'm going to show you some of this will be one of the write-ups that I did. So again, this was helpful. I kept track of everything I did. I took screenshots. I could come back, add to his, like augment the things he had in his write-up. But again, we have this clue. And then what you can do, you can actually take this into, I'm not going to actually do it here because I'm running Teams in my browser. And if I open up Fiddler, it's going to start intercepting a lot of traffic from the actual video for the talk. But this is the clue. And there's lots of different ways to solve it. So I'm not trying to say this is definitely what you have to do. I'm going to just show you a variety of things that you can do to solve the problems. There's other ways to do it. And like I said, it's often interesting at the end how Bob solved his versus how I did mine. So I'm a Fiddler user, and in Fiddler Classic, they have a text wizard built in. So right across the top, I can go to the text wizard. I can paste in that encoded value, and then it's got a drop down of various types of encoding. So if you've done any encoding before, usually if it's base 64, it typically ends in an equal or a double equal. But as you see things like that, that's just gibberish, you can come in here and then you can just choose from the various drop downs. It turned out this was base 64. So you can actually just go in and say, is it base 64? Other things for transformations. And then here you see what the actual flag was. So during the competition, they're going to have the list of challenges. I'm going to click on that one. I see this. If I think I see the flag, I'll copy and paste it in, and it will tell me either yes, you got it right, or no, you didn't. He does not follow the specific flag syntax. So in other words, for his competition, you'll see as we go through, there's not anything specific about how it looks. I'll show you some competitions later where every time it will say flag, curly brace, something. It just helps you know right away. This one's pretty obvious because it's talking about capture the flag. So I just took that, pasted in for that particular solution or that particular challenge, and then you get points. And of course, the points vary based on how difficult the things are. But you'll see a lot of these things where you're just doing basic encoding. So if we look, again, that happened to be the flag. Next one just said it's a key challenge, and they just said use this key to find the flag, and they gave me a JPEG file. So this was, it seemed to me, very likely going to be what's called steganography, which is they're embedding information into this image in places that you can't see it. So it doesn't change anything visible about how the key looks, so you wouldn't suspect there's anything here. I'm going to go out to this particular site I found. Steg Online. So I'm just going to take that image, I'm going to upload it. It's going to do some interpretation. So if you don't know this, when you're taking pictures on your phones especially, it's capturing lat long and other metadata, like what was the shutter speed. There's a whole lot of stuff that gets stored in that metadata about images. So what I do here, I come out and then I just start looking around for where might they hide something. So I can just say I only want to see the red colors, because sometimes it might be something that if you've used those colored glasses where you can't see it right away, but when there's that filter, it shows up. So I just tried various colors. I didn't see anything obvious here that was displaying. So I can start going through these other things in metadata. I'm going to go into this show string. So it's pretty typical that there are string areas within the image where they can embed specific information. And if you go here, you can see that happened to be the flag. So again, there's lots of different steganography. They embed things in videos. Images are very popular, but it's the same concept. It just visually, you're not going to notice it, but they're able to slip some data into that actual stream where it doesn't impact how it looks. So the next one just said image is everything. So again, we'll think hints here, but it says, can you find the flag? And it just gives you a text file that you can download. So given the hint, given the way this is named, it's probably an image in a text format. So this is really a handy site for doing the encodings and other stuff as well. It's called CyberChef. So what I want to do is I want to go in this input, and I'm going to open up that file. Get it this way instead. Okay, so if I open this, it's a text file, but you can notice now it looks to me that these are individual bytes. So this is a hex representation of that file. So I'm just going to say I want to select all, I'm going to copy, and then I can come back and put it into the input. So I've got all this stuff. Now what it does, it's got the input, and then it says on the chef that you can run various steps in the baking process. So I've got the input. I'm just going to look over on the left. It looks like hex to me. So I'm going to drag this from hex over. It's now going to transform that, assuming it's from hex, it's going to take it out of hex. And now on the right side, I can see this is the clue, right? If you're familiar with files, you do a lot of things with this where the first bytes in a file often notify you of what the type is. So now that I know that's a PNG, I'm just going to save it that way. So I can just do that. And if I open it up, that happens to be the flag. So again, it's another somewhat of an encoding technique trick for that particular one. Environmentally friendly. So the clue was just a link to a Docker image. So I've done some work with containers. I had not done a lot of work with them before. just going to go out to the solutions. I can show you. I'll show you his first. So the clue is it's just a link to a Docker image. So what do you do with this? So basically, I took mine. I'll show you mine first, then I'll pop back to his. I spent a lot of time on this one. You'll find out there's various challenges where I'm not as familiar with an area as I am with encoding or cryptography or some of that. I had not done a lot of stuff with containers. So I got Docker for Windows and I spun this up and I had all sorts of problem where it kept telling me that I had access denied. So I assumed the problem was I didn't know how to run Docker on Docker for Windows and it wasn't configured right or I didn't know how to run it. It actually, the access denied was part of the challenge. And so I'd wasted, like I said, a lot of time doing that. I got a bit frustrated with this, and this is where the reverse engineering comes in. So I booted up Docker, and I was trying to look at files, and I was having problems getting it to run, like I said. So I actually found a way to access the Docker file system from Windows. So I went out and searched and said, well, that's interesting. I've done that before with virtual machines. I can just mount the machine and then I can use the file system. So I mounted this and then I was able to see this environmentally friendly.dll. And since the name of that is environmentally friendly, this looked to me like it was likely going to be hopefully .NET code so that I could reverse engineer it. So I took ILDASM. If you're familiar in .NET, you can use ILDASM against the IL code in your assembly and bring it back so that I could view it. So when I did that, it came back to here and I just kind of perused throughout that decompiled stuff and figured out that that's probably, and here again would be, I wish the flag was a standard syntax just because it'd be more obvious to me that this was it, because there were other strings in there that I had to try along the way. So like I said, it took me a lot of time, but then when I got to this, the solution wasn't actually all that difficult. When I went back and read his when it was over, he's got this whole long description. You had to follow quite a chain to get through doing it the way that he was expecting you to do it. So if you want to, I'm going to give you links to these write-ups later. He goes through and all the things you'd have to notice and try. That was the access denied stuff I talked about. But it was actually an environment variable. And that was the hint with the environmentally. There was an environment variable set for the passwords. You could get at the flag by knowing that. But if you read through here, it's quite a stretch. There's times where the designers of these might think that they're not that strange or confusing, or they are intentionally doing this to make it difficult. But this was one of the ones that I just did not get what he was going for, and yet still solved it by kind of coming at it from another direction. Another one is following protocol. So the challenge was, I'm sure that I don't have a keylogger uploading what I type. So if you got malware on your machine, I think I was listening to Troy Hunt. If you follow Troy Hunt with Have I Been Pwned, he's been talking about what they call stealer logs. So what happens is you get malware on your machine and it's got a keylogger. So basically everything you're typing, so you type, www.amazon.com, prompts you for your user ID and password. And as you're typing that keylogger is actually either storing it temporarily and then sending it out later, or it's doing a live send as you're doing stuff to transmit back the user ID, passwords, credit cards, all of that. So this just gave a capture.pcap file. So if you've done network traces before, PCAPs are used by Wireshark. So I knew at least that this was a product, Wireshark, that was sitting between the browser and the server, so it could intercept all the communications that were going from your machine out to the internet somewhere. So I took that PCAP file. I like to use Fiddler. So as normal, I just took Fiddler Classic in this case. By the way, there's Fiddler everywhere. If you're not familiar with that, they rewrote Fiddler to have a more modern user interface and work cross-platform. And they basically stopped working on Fiddler Classic and are investing all their engineering into Fiddler everywhere. So things like HTTP2 and other things that don't work in Classic do work in Fiddler everywhere. I happen to take this, I put it into Classic, I imported the sessions. So even though this is a Wireshark file, all of these products know how to read each other's archives and file saves. So I put that in, I chose the packet capture, and then you can see all, if you've done Fiddler before, these are all transmissions. So these are posts that are getting sent out to some really weird looking host here. But each one of them, if you look on the right-hand side, you can see it says key equals H. So as you're going and I'm typing hello world or whatever, it's on each keystroke. This one was written to send that individual key out to that server on the internet. So in this case, I just had to capture enough of those, go through each one of those to be able to construct that flag. But this is another case where if you're, I hope a lot of the developers use Fiddler and are familiar with it, but a lot of system admins and other people use Wireshark. So you'll start to notice with Capture the Flag, it touches on lots of other areas of expertise. And like I said, you might be good in a particular area, but I like this because it's stressing me to work on things that I'm not as familiar with, if that makes sense. Okay, so this is the next year, 2021. And it just said Sweet 16, and it had a crossword puzzle. And so the hint on this one to me was the original 16 and this list of colors. So I knew, I've been around this long, I knew that there were only 16 standard colors supported when CSS first came out. So I just went and searched for CSS named colors. And this is the original list of 16. And then if you go back and you look at the, not very visible here, but as you fill out the crossword puzzle, you'll get to the point that now you come back to here, and one of the crossword directions turns out to be that fuchsia will fit there. I think that's odd for only 16 colors that that's one of them, but there's also a Chuck Norris, if you didn't know that. But so this helped because I was a web developer. I happen to know that about CSS, so didn't take long to track that one down. So the next one said free ebook. So when I came out here, here was the challenge. It just says for the cost of a monthly subscription. I wish I would have captured the original image. It was a complete bookshelf. So every time I went to that site, all I saw was that image of books. So I took, in this case, DevTools. So if you go into DevTools, you can open up the network panel. So I like using Fiddler. I can do a lot of manipulation. If I'm just doing a quick, I want to see which files are being requested. So in this case, and to show you how to do it differently, I went into DevTools, went into the network panel, and I noticed that there was a site CSS file. So one of the CSS coming down with this particular page, and then you're able to actually block it. So this was something that was added to DevTools for the network panel not so long ago, that I can stop this request from succeeding. Something that Fiddler's had for a long time, and network panel just started to pick this up. But I said, I'm just going to block that file and see what happens. So I blocked that, and then suddenly they had an image that was being overlaid on this portion that they were then showing with the site CSS. So as soon as I took that and blocked it, suddenly that image did not overlay this, and I could see that here is the flag. So again, this is one that was helpful to know the network tracing, how the CSS works. We'll see a few more examples of that here in a bit. The next one is all wound up. So as soon as I heard wound up, if you've studied a lot of cryptography from many years ago, one of the original cryptography was they had what was called a sci-tail. So basically they had, think of a rod that had a certain diameter. They would wrap leather or paper, whatever they wanted, around that, and then they would write the message straight across. So when I saw the owl wound up and I noticed there were some scissors here, I printed it, I cut it out, and then the challenge was, how do I know which, what is the actual rod being used? Like, what's the right diameter? So I was hoping he was not being a jerk and he did something easy. So I went out and took a pencil. Took me a little while, but I found an old wooden pencil like this. And as long as it's the same diameter, whatever the sightail is, when you wrap it, you'll just be able to see as he's flipping through here, you can see the words that make up the clue. So again, that one just happened to be, I've heard of it from a long time ago with cryptography, but wasn't too hard after I figured out that it was wrapped around a pencil. So this one, clueless, it just said, this is an undocumented flag. Can you find it? And it just had a link to a website. So what I did here, I was doing a network trace again. In this case, I used Fiddler. And you're just looking for things that might be odd or off. I noticed that there was a file called util.js. So I opened it up and I saw this little segment of code. If you've used this before, there's local storage where you can store stuff on the client. And I noticed the set item flag. And these are Unicode characters. And so when I saw that, that's not going to be the actual flag. But then I saw the end one actually look kind of like a unicorn. So in DevTools, you can actually go in the application panel and you can see what's in your local storage. So after I ran this page, I could go into local storage. I could see that he was storing something there, and I could see the key and then the flag. And in this case, the Unicode was just for these small icon. So it's basically anchor, baseball, snowman, unicorn, I think is how that one turned out. Yep. Okay, so this one, choose wisely. Again, this looks like something that has been encoded. So the other thing they gave you with this clue, they basically said, here's a flags.txt file full of a whole bunch of things that look like flags, and it was rather large. I had to figure out what are these potential flag values? How does that correspond to this? So if you've done some cryptography before, there's something called hashing. And the idea with a hash is a computed value. It's a fixed size, and it just is the computation of whatever data you have. So whatever that file was, so I figured this was a hash. The way hashing works, it's a fixed size, so I could figure out which algorithm he was probably using to do the hashing. So I figured out that it probably was, I'll go down here and see if I can make that a little bit bigger. So if we look, I chose to write .NET code. So I just said, I don't want to go through everything in that file. I know that this is the result. I know that that is a hash value probably. And because it looks like it's hex, so I know it's a hash converted to hex. So I had to figure out based on its size, you can determine that it's a SHA-256 is the particular size that will end up being that long. So I just wrote a .NET program. It created the hash. It walks through basically every line in that flags file. And for every line in that flag file, it will go compute the hash. And you can see I'm using UTF encoding. And then here, this bit converter will make it be hex as a string. And then as you saw earlier, usually when that gets shown, it's like this first byte, AE-44-. So I had to pull the dashes out. So I ran this program and said, you keep running, take every potential flag, hash it, and then if that value you get from doing that hex conversion on the hash ever equals the result, then you win. And so it turned out in this case, this is the one that actually hashes down to that. So again, in this case, it just helps to come from cryptography, hashing sort of background to know what you need to do to be able to figure out how that one worked. So this was in 2022. So I think 2020 was the first time I did it, and I got like second or third in the competition. And then 2021, I won. In 2022, I was kind of joking with the organizer because I'm doing them virtual. So this is in New Hampshire. And since I had been second and then first or whatever it was, Bob said he put in a specific clue to call me out and said he wanted to give an advantage to being in person at the conference. So just the fact that I was virtual. So he wanted to give a slight leg up that people in the competition who physically showed up would have an advantage. And he thought you'd have to be very lucky or intuitive to get this one. So on the day of the event, he said, find the book that contains the solution to this. So these, the hints are it's physical, so it's something you have to be there for. The book was the kicker. So there's a thing called a book cipher. What a book cipher does is it says it's page, line, word. And so the first part of the flag is going to be on page 53, line 20, word 3. Okay. So now the problem is, what the hell did he use for the book, right? I have no idea. I didn't know any of the attendees. If I needed to, I would have had somebody in my virtual talk go over and look at the book and tell me what it was. But I was trying to do this actually before the thing opened. So I knew it was a book, but it's a very specific because different editions don't line up right. So now my problem is I'm not at the conference. I don't know anybody else there, and I don't know what this physical book was. And so again, he was kind of saying you have to be lucky or intuitive. He happened to have a little mistake in how he was running it. Throughout that competition that year, he used a couple references to The Martian. If you know the movie, he had one of the scenes where the robot's looking at different things to send a coded message. So these things were sprinkled in other challenges during 2022. So I was hoping or guessing maybe he used The Martian as the book. So I went and got an ebook for it, and I was looking up these lines, these pages, and it didn't line up. So I was pretty confident that that was what it was, but nobody near me had the physical book. So my daughter's in library science. I sent to her, and she'd already left campus. She's like, I don't know, 30 minutes away from campus. So she drove back to the university, got the physical, The Martian book, luckily the right edition, and then she was texting me pictures of different pages. So if you look, so the first one back here was 53, line 20, word 3. So this is what my daughter had sent. So I had to count down here until I got to, so here's page 53, that's line 20, and that's the third word. So basically went through there, got the other two, turned out to be that, and it turned out to be that. So it's just kind of interesting that it's a decent code, and the likelihood that anybody would guess the exact book that you had used is pretty unlikely. The other problem when you want to encode it, you better hope every word you want to put in your message happens to be in that book, right? But it was just kind of interesting that he made just a flaw, right? Out of all the books that he could have chosen, any other book, I would have never found this out. I would have given up, or I would have gone and tried to have somebody at the conference tell me what it was. But because he had used The Martian elsewhere, that's what he was thinking about. That's what he decided to put. So that little flaw is the only reason that I got it. Okay, so those are the Granite State Code Camp ones. I'm going to show you some other places. I've done that one quite a bit. There's another place called Pico CTF, and it's basically if you go out there, let's see if I have a link to that one easily. Yeah, there's this. This is one of the challenges, but we'll go out to the. So if you come out here, this helps you kind of visualize what the competition stuff is like. Now, this isn't so much a competition as just challenges that you can do anytime you want. So I can come out here and just say, well, I know SSH, maybe I'll do that one. And then it tells you how many people have solved it, what % of the people solve it, whether they find it easy or hard. And then you get certain points for solving those problems. So this is a good place to go try things. I'll show you the one that we're talking about now with this inspector. So with this one, this is the website. So you have to just go out and try to figure out from here, what are you going to do? So I'm going to have to open up Fiddler here. Hopefully it's not going to screw up my teams too badly. All right, so I'm going to come back here. I'm going to hit Control F5 right away. Go back, tell Fiddler to quit. Okay, so this is pretty typical too. If you haven't seen Fiddler, it's a proxy sitting between the client browser and the server. And so it's just intercepting all the requests. So I can see here's the request for the HTML page. I'm just going to bring this down. It's compressed. So I'm going to take off the compression. And then I can hit the raw view and I can see here's the HTML that was sent down. So I use this every day while I worked on the e-commerce site. Every day I had something someone said didn't work or something that didn't turn out how I wanted it to. So I was in here constantly. I just happened to look around the HTML and you'll notice you have a third of the flag. Now this is where it's useful. They stick with this flag syntax. So every time you see a Pico CTF in that left curly brace, you know that that's part of a flag. So you won't waste time guessing on any of the other words that might be in here. So that's helpful. So I can see here, it tells me I have a third of the flag. If I look, there's also a JavaScript file. So if I look at that and I scroll down, here's the third part of it. And then CSS, since that's text-based, is also very likely. So if I go down there, there is the second part. So I could take the 1, 2, 3, string them together, and then I had that flag. So this is also useful. You've seen I've mentioned it through multiple different challenges, just the ability to do network tracing, whether you do it in here or browser dev tools or whatever, just being able to see the traffic going back and forth. I could see things that were embedded in that particular file. CTF Learn is another site that has just a lot of challenges that you can try randomly. This one, where can my robot go? So if you think of robots in the context of websites, there's a robots.txt file that you can drop in the root of your website, and you can basically tell search engines, I don't want you to look at stuff that's here. I don't want you to index any of that, make it searchable. And it's up to the robots then to say, okay, I'll honor that, I won't do that. So I went out, here's CTF Learn, here's their robots.txt. They're saying, please don't index this, which if you're hackers, there's something probably interesting in there because they don't want the agents to index it. So if I go back and actually make a request for that file, you can see up here, and there's the flag. And again, they follow that same syntax of we're going to keep the flags looking a certain way to make it easier for people to do. So again, if you know those things, like I happen to know that robot was the robot text for SEO, that's just the advantage of being a web developer. So you can keep seeing there's different skill areas that all contribute to different things that you could find. I've talked about some useful tools. So I gave you a link there to Fiddler. I've also used the browser dev tools. We looked at this CyberChef is what we were doing to take that hex and bring it back. I put this one in italics because I still do that in a sandbox. It just seems kind of dicey to me. I've not heard anything about it, but when I do use it, it's good. I've kind of gravitated to CyberChef, but it does talk about a lot of specific cryptographic algorithms and such. So I've used it quite a bit. But like I said, if it's dicey at all or questionable, I won't run it on my regular machine. So that's one I do from a sandbox. We talked about Wireshark. I don't have to use that very often because Fiddler's at a better level for me. So I used to use Microsoft's network monitors very much like Wireshark. It's not just looking at HTTP. and it's not looking at a complete request and response. It's all the packets being sent. So you kind of have to reassemble things. So it's just a little bit more detailed. I don't tend to use it unless one of the other high-level tools isn't working for some reason. Like I turned on compression for our website many years ago. I wanted to see the reduction in frames being sent from the server to the client when I was compressed. There's where Wireshark or Netmon is helpful because it's at the packet level. So I could see before compression it used whatever the numbers were, 53 packets. Now it's down to 10. I wouldn't be able to measure that, so to speak, in Fiddler as far as at a packet level. I could see the size was smaller. So like I said, Wireshark has its uses, but I don't tend to use it a lot. If you want to look into more hacking tools, so these are pre-set up Linux distributions that have hacker tools built into them. And I'm not just saying hackers are the people that use them. I mean, security people use these all the time, but if you've heard of Kali, it's more popular, that top one. So basically you can go out and get that, run it on your Raspberry Pi or wherever you want to, and then it's got a bunch of tools built in like Burp Suite and other things that you would use for security purposes. That way you just don't have to kind of go assemble all of your own tools. And then Parrot is another one if you're interested in those two things. Gave you a link here to a few different places. CTF 101 just kind of gives the background we talked about for Jeopardy, the different types of questions you'll see, and kind of explains what the process is and how you might solve them. We looked at the Pico CTF already, so they have some resources out there. And that again is another, I think that might be the competition part that we were looking at. So that's one of them. And then if we look at this, the CTF Learn is one that we did. So here's the CTF handbook. So it does break it down by what are crypto questions, what are forensic. So as you get a little more deep into it, if you want to know what does reverse engineering usually look like, so that you'll notice it when you see it. And then CTF Learn. And you can see this is just another challenge where you can come out and do it whenever you want, just to see what kind of score you got. I like the competitions just because I'm competitive. So when I started it, like I said, I was pretty concerned the first year, but then I turned out to do pretty well at it. I liked it. So pretty much in the fall for about a week or 2 weeks before the actual conference, this is all I'm going to be doing. And I'll be muttering things, upset at times and then elated at other times when I get ones. But some of them, turns out every year, there's probably 3 or 4 of them that just, I'm not a penetration tester, right? I don't know some of the things that these want me to do. So I'll end up spending days and days. And that's where the keeping notes helps, just to go, okay, I already tried that. I already tried that. But if you just want to come out and try things too without the competition, these are cool places to do that. And then, so these are some of the challenges. Granite State Code Camp is the one that I do a lot. They did not have a conference last year, but I'm hoping this fall again they'll be there. Bob Crowley is the person who, so most of the things you saw in here were his. He has to spend a ton of time getting all those challenges. He does a great job. It's a good mixture of things. So I really appreciate the work he does to get that set up. I enjoy it every year. It's probably, 25 to 50 people probably competing. So it's not thousands of people. You can go out some of the time they run challenges on these other ones where they actually have a competition. Try Hack Me has a Christmas, not so much a competition, but I started doing this every year just to get a feeling. So every year, each day, they're having a description. So basically say, here's the challenge. They'll let you work on it that day. The person who put the challenge out usually records a video about how they specifically solved it. So a lot of these I'll get to the point where, again, this is pretty massive and people that are in security full-time are doing these. So they tend to be a little harder. If I don't solve it myself, that's fine. Watching the videos for every day, I think about the challenge, see if I have a prayer to do it. If not, I watch the video at the end, and at least I learned how these things are set up, which then benefits me when I go to other competitions, because I'll know, well, I saw something like that before from Advent of Cyber. So it's kind of cool. That's every December. And then if you go to major hacker conferences like DEF CON or Black Hat, this is big time competitions for lots of money, typically teams of people. So like I said, I tend to be cryptography and encoding, not so much forensics and things like that. So you could build a team of people who specialize in all the different areas and then compete for something like that. You do get to try. So I mentioned this on the other one. After I got the book clue, Bob was going to make it even harder the next year. So the next year he just said, come to the registration desk and there's something there. And obviously I'm not there. Again, I don't know anybody who's there. They have you talk to their sponsors. So one of the vendors, I talked to her and was talking about what she does and stuff. And then I said, do you know what the challenge is? Could you walk over to the table and tell me what it is? So a little while later we were chatting and she said, it's a box with a padlock on it. I said, oh, well, now you would really have to physically be there, right? I know how to pick locks. That's one of my other hobbies that my wife got me introduced to. She went to a conference session on it, and we enjoy it as a family, just trying to do all these other locks. I'm like, that's really disappointing because I'm here. Obviously, I'm not there. And what am I going to do? Well, she made the mistake of saying she knows how to pick locks. So I said, why don't you go over there and pick that lock for me and tell me what the thing is? And she said, no, I'm a vendor for the conference and stuff. I don't know that that would be fair. And I said, he doesn't care. So it took me about probably 2 hours throughout the day of in a chat, just slowly trying to convince her to go do this for me. Like they call it social engineering. What can I try that might work, right? So basically about 2 hours of back and forth. And then she finally went over and picked it right before the competition ended. So I got that last code from her. It was just kind of funny to do the social engineering. I've been trying to do more of that. So around the house, we'll tend to be working with a vendor who charges us too much or something. And I just used to dread having to call them and argue. And now I actually kind of look forward to it when there's things like that, just to see, just to test social engineering techniques. So the reason I brought it up, DEF CON has a cool thing if you've been there where they have a stage with a telephone booth and they put someone in there and they tell them what they need to do. And then they're calling people trying to get info. And the sound is played throughout the auditorium, but obviously inside there, the person they're talking to can't tell. And so it's a huge competition just to see what techniques are they using to eventually try to get the info out of this person by just calling them. So anyways, that's kind of funny. So that was the first year I won. I have a friend goes ways back. He's a security person now. So I had said, if I ever get stuck on some of the stuff I don't know, do you want to team up and help me? And he said he'd help me 2021. And then he never actually did. And so my wife made him this t-shirt that just had the capture the flag and then said, I won, and then I didn't help. So we got a chuckle out of that. I don't know if he got a chuckle out of that. Here are some of the write-ups. So again, if you go out there, he's got all the write-ups, here were all of the clues, and then he goes into detail. And like I said, I've shown you ones of mine that are, I would say 75% of the time, if I get them, I went at it pretty much like he did. And then there's just that few where like the Docker thing where I'm like, I just don't get what you're asking for, but I found another way to get it anyway. So I'll write up the ones where I do something drastically different than he does. But it's useful to go see these just because you can see the kind of questions that get asked and see somebody walking through and explaining to if you had this problem, what would you do? And so again, just various write-ups of different people. Some resources. I do have 3 books or 3 courses on Pluralsight if you're interested. Intro to Cryptography in .NET, Fiddler, and then the last one, debugging your website with Fiddler and Chrome tools. And the idea of that one is something doesn't work on my site, and what should I use? Should I use Fiddler, Chrome DevTools? So it walks through the tracing and stuff you can do in browser dev tools that are cool to be able to troubleshoot problems. All three of those come into play for capture the flag. There's a couple other places you can safely practice techniques. They're not CTF, but some of the techniques you learn might be useful. The OWASP Juice Shop. So this is just a demo site where you can go out and try. If you've heard of the OWASP top 10 flaws for web developers that you should be familiar with, the Juice Shop has those sorts of flaws, so you can work through and see if you can figure out what's wrong there and how would you fix it. And then the Damn Vulnerable Web App, that one is not hosted anywhere. As far as there's not like a live site you can do things. And if you go, I was out there the other day checking it out again, and they said don't ever actually host this on a web server because it has real flaws and it could give people access to your machine. So they don't actually point to like, here's where it is as a URL that you can go try stuff, because they're saying it'd be compromised very quickly. So if you're going to set that up anywhere, make sure that you have access to it and no one else has. But it's not a capture the flag thing, but it's an app that has a ton of flaws that they've seen in all sorts of different websites, so you can see what not to do. Again, that's my Twitter, that is my email, that is my blog. There's a link to the slides that'll have some of the things for resources and things like that that we talked about. And I don't know if we've had any questions up till now, or if anybody has any they'd like to say.
None in the chat, Robert.
Okay.
Did anyone have any questions? No, you explained everything perfectly and no one has any questions.
It's a lot of fun. Like I said, I was scared to do it just because I'd never done it before, and I'm not really a security person, but I was interested in it, and yeah, it's fun. It's a good time. Like I said, I'd always heard the things I knew was wrong, but it is different, at least for me. The first time I actually got a SQL injection to work and I dumped out the whole user ID password table, then it really sinks in for me of, this is what you're not going to do when I'm playing the other side trying to protect things. So, and if you heard cryptography things that you're interested in, what is it, on April 2nd? Yeah, April 2nd, we're going to have Cryptography 101 here.
Yeah.
Well, I'll go through all the hashing and a lot of the stuff that unfortunately, maybe I should have flipped them the other way if you didn't have some of that background. But if you were intrigued by any of the encoding or those sorts of things, we're going to have that on April 2nd here. So,
yeah. Are there any cryptography topics that anyone would want him to cover other than just Cryptography 101? Okay, I guess the answer to that was no. All right.
Okay. Well, that is all I had then.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Robert. That was really good.
Well, you're welcome.
And we'll talk to you in a couple more months. And
yes.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you very much. Okay. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, send me any questions you have. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. I'll post this. Let me know if you want an original copy of the video as well.
Yeah, I would like it.
Rock on.
Thanks for having me. We'll see you. Yep. Bye.
Ciao.